When she discovered her husband face down in the Powder River, she did not scream. She didn't scream until she saw Eli. The following morning, McCrae rides out of the dust. For 3 months, Lily Hart had been a widow. And it was long enough for people in Sheridan to forget your name. However, every ranch hand on the street looked twice at her that morning due to the terror in her eyes. She didn't stop for anyone, even if none of them dared to inquire as to why she had ridden through town with her clothes ripped and her hands trembling. She galloped right past the blacksmith, past the saloon where 2 guys spat tobacco at her horse, and past the church steps where the pastor gave her an untrustworthy pity nod. She continued to ride till she came to the one ranch that everyone claimed belonged to a fearless man. There would be nowhere else for her to go if this man rejected her. McCrae Eli. The majority of Sheridan residents merely muttered his name. He was referred to as a calm storm by some. Some claimed that he was the reason there was still a sheriff on the former Bozeman Trail. However, there was a straightforward consensus. You traveled to the McCrae residence and hoped he was in a good mood if you were in trouble and had nowhere else to flee. Lily didn't offer prayers. As he was giving salt to a juvenile run, she smashed her boots on the ground and approached him directly. She swore that Eli's eyes could see every lie a man had ever told her as he glanced up slowly as dawn. She felt as though someone was actually observing her, not just her black outfit, for the first time since the burial. He inquired as to whether she had been pursued. She gave a nod. She then shared all of her knowledge with him. The boulders thrown into her well, the cut fences at her property close to the Big Horn Mountains foothills, and the shadow that passed her window at midnight. The whispering voice outside her barn said that a woman could not hold land in Wyoming on her own. Eli did not blink while he listened. Dust was blown on his boots by the wind. The run pricked its ears as if it knew trouble was on the way. Even the horses were able to detect impending storms. Furthermore, it didn't feel like the kind that delivered rain. Eli's jaw tightened once, like a man hearing an old bullet shift in a scar, when Lily finally pronounced the name Harlan Voss. That name was familiar to him. Everybody did. The man who claimed her husband's death was an accident on the route was a land thief and cattle lord. Lily moved in closer. Her voice broke. She claimed that she wasn't there to show sympathy. She arrived because she needed a man who didn't scare easily and because someone wanted her land and someone else wanted her gone. Eli cleaned his hands, glanced at the mountains, and then turned back to face her as if gauging her remaining strength. He posed a single, subdued inquiry that determines the entire plot before it ever begins. Are you prepared to face the truth that may accompany this? Lily responded by posing her own query. What if the truth is worse than the man who murdered my spouse? Without saying anything more, Eli hitched horse, and Lily rode beside him all the way back to Hart Ranch, trying not to imagine the expression in his eyes when she mentioned Harlan Voss. It wasn't fear. It seemed colder, like a recollection he didn't want to recall. The afternoon sun was melting into that harsh Wyoming gold by the time they arrived at the ranch, making every shadow appear harsher than it should. To stop her thoughts from pursuing the ghost, Lily continued to speak. She gestured to the hay strewn all over the place, the leaning fence, the tales of cowboy love, and the thump she had heard behind the barn. Eli merely nodded while crouching to examine footsteps that she had not previously noticed. He gave no explanation. She noticed it when he straightened up, even though he never did. Verification. There had been a visitor. He proceeded to the front porch, where Lily had been attempting to drag an old storage box that morning, and a large bale of hay was sitting half-broken. Even thinking about it made her feel ashamed. Before giving up, she had been pulling at that item and grunting for perhaps 10 minutes. Eli tested the frame by tapping its side, then gave her a small smile. You cannot drag it because it is too large. Too large? To see what's wrong with these braces, just sit on it. She rolled her eyes at the way he said it, yet her heart still skipped a beat. The ease with which an elderly guy could accomplish that, especially one who hardly spoke, was unfair. She moved in the direction of the hay bale, lowered her skirt just enough to avoid tripping, and prepared to sit so he could examine the wood joints beneath it. At that moment, she heard a shaky, dry, and gentle sound. It sounds like the rattling of beans in a tin can. It originated directly beneath her boots. Lily's breath stuck in her throat as she froze. She looked down. With its head up and its tail twitching, a fat rattlesnake emerged from the straw, its eyes set on the spot where she had been about to sit. With a cry, she staggered back, her heels striking the porch's edge, and she slumped backward violently. Eli instinctively lunged for her, and they both almost fell, her hands gripping his shirt as she slammed against his chest and his arm locking around her waist to keep her upright. He didn't pull out his handgun until her breath was still trembling against him. The air was cracked by a single, precise shot. Without barely twitching, the snake fell. Lily gazed at the lifeless body that lay precisely where her legs had been. This narrative would have ended on that porch if she had sat down a heartbeat earlier. For the first time, she questioned whether the snake had actually wandered there by itself as her skin crawled and her stomach turned over. Because Eli's expression changed in a way that made her blood run cold as he scooped up the body to examine it. Why was the snake's tail marked with a rope? Eli handled that dead rattlesnake as if it were a clue from a crime scene rather than a living creature. Lily observed his eyes, which were calm, sharp, and narrow like an old tracker examining a print in the dirt. The corpse was somewhat turned by his Old West stories, and there it was once again. It appeared as though someone had tied the snake up, brought it, and dropped it precisely where she was going to sit because of the thin line that was pressed firmly into the scales on the tail. The hair on Lily's arm stood up. This time, it was out of rage rather than fear. She believed that she and her spouse had been buried together. Someone wanted her removal. Someone wanted her to be either reckless enough to perish or terrified enough to flee. And that someone was aware of her precise residence, walking route, and coffee-drinking spot in the mornings. Eli carefully and slowly brushed his hands after setting down the snake. He didn't speak out. He didn't swear. He didn't even appear shocked. He simply appeared weary of men who think they own the entire region. He asked Lily whether she had seen anything that was out of place, relocated, or missing. Although she recalled the hay bale leaning incorrectly and the fence rails tucking under it as if they had been handled hastily, she shook her head. Eli studied boot tracks as he strolled around the porch. Lily trailed him, seeing as he pointed with his chin at small details she would never have noticed, like broken straw and scuffed dirt. Then, close to the house's corner, he discovered a single boot print with a deep notch in the heel, the exact type of heel she had noticed on Harlan Voss's trail boss's boots. She forcefully swallowed. Eli kept the name to himself. He didn't have to. It was stated for him by Lily. It's Harlan. It must be. Eli gazed at the distant treant, rubbed his palms on his pants, and allowed the hush to descend between them. Certain things don't need to be said. The only name that fit those recordings was already known to both of them. They wouldn't wait for the next snake, he assured her. They wouldn't look to the sheriff for assistance. Before someone ended her life, they would construct the scene themselves, apprehend the man who believed he possessed her land, and put an end to this. His plan was straightforward, yet it contained a level of danger reminiscent of Wild West love stories that made Lily's heart race. 3 months ago, she was a different woman. She felt more powerful now, like if she had finally made the decision to fight back. Eli asked her if she was truly prepared because there would be no going back once they got going. Lily first glanced at the dead snake, then at the muddy tracks and last at the man who had supported her during her fall. She gave a nod. Consider subscribing if you're enjoying this tale so you don't miss the next installment. Tell me where you are and what time it is while you relax in with a warm cup of tea. Lily didn't get much sleep that night because she was afraid, but rather because Eli's plan kept coming back to her like a hawk over a rabbit path. By dawn, the two of them had already moved silently and intently across the property, arranging everything just the way Eli desired. He informed her that it was easy to catch a man like Heron. You don't pursue him. You give him the impression that he is pursuing you. Lily so fulfilled her role. She appeared to be a worn-out woman as she rode into Sheridan late that morning, her hair loose and her boots dusty. After visiting the general store, she went to the livery. Then, on warm days, she passed directly by the saloon where Heron enjoyed sitting. Naturally, he watched her more intently as she pretended not to see him. She felt as though she was walking out on a rail-free ledge with each step she took past the saloon. When he entered the boardwalk and inquired about her well-being, she let her shoulders sag just enough to look despondent. She admitted to him that she had not gotten much sleep, informed him that a snake had attempted to bite her, informed him that she would be by herself on Hart Ranch tonight and that Eli had returned to his own ranch. When she replied, "I have been thinking maybe you were right about selling," her voice almost faltered. "This position cannot be held by a woman alone indefinitely. I do not know if I can keep fighting this," she said, using the words Eli had taught her. Perhaps it would be simpler to sell the property. Like a cat who had finally managed to unlock the door of the chicken coop, Harlan grinned at her. He told her he hoped she made the correct decision and wished her a pleasant day. With a courteous gesture, Lily turned her horse and rode home as composedly as a preacher. However, she removed her mask as soon as she arrived at Hart Ranch. Eli was already inspecting his firearm in the barn loft. Out of sight, 2 of his trusty cowboys were stationed next to the windmill. For the first time in months, Lily felt secure. It fell quickly in the evening. The sky became purple. Even the grass appeared to stop breathing when the temperature dropped. Lily left the front door slightly cracked to give the impression of carelessness and lighted one lamp in the house. Her heart was thumping like a drum in a church hall when she sat at the table. She recognized 3 horses moving slowly and deliberately, predators, not guests, when she heard the first hoofbeats. Lily got to her feet and took hold of the little handgun Eli had handed her. She told herself that she wasn't bait. She participated in the trap. Whether she remained a victim or became the rightful owner of this land would depend on what transpired tonight. A shadow entered the doorway. A man wearing a bandana over his neck and grinning as if he had done this before. He instructed her to gather her belongings and arrive secretly. "Go to hell," she said. The ensuing altercation lacked grace. That it was real, loud, and urgent. Lily struck him in the face with a wooden block. He faltered. She shot once into the ground to summon the thunder she knew was lurking in the shadows rather than to strike. Eli emerged from the shadows like lightning at the crack of that bullet. The trap was set off in an instant. However, even Eli was surprised by what he discovered outside the house. The man waiting behind the barn was who? And why did he appear more afraid than menacing? With his weapon raised, Eli arrived at the barn's corner prepared to do the task. However, the man hiding behind the water trough wasn't pointing a gun at him. With his hands raised and his eyes darting like a caged animal, he was trembling that he continued to mutter that he had only come because Harlan had made him, and that he had never intended to harm Lily. He said that Harlan spent more money on the snake. He claimed that after removing Lily, Harlan intended to set the ranch on fire. Lily realized then that this was more than simply dirt and fences. The goal was to remove her name from the map. His voice broke like if he had finally arrived at the end of a terrifying journey. Eli let the man breathe by lowering his rifle just enough. Then he moved in closer and posed the query that Lily had been hesitant to ask for months. Why did Harlan have such a strong desire for her land? The man informed them about a new cattle path that Harlan desired to dominate. He might get wealthy and gain even more authority in Sheridan by taking a route that passed directly through Hart Ranch. With dust in her hair and a pistol still trembling in her palm, Lily stood in the doorway and listened. Within her shift, she sensed something. Eli gave his cowboys a signal that was neither fear nor rage, but rather something stronger and more stable. Before sunrise, they brought the man into town together. Sheridan awoke to a confession that quickly gained traction. A murderous confession. Danger. The snake. The scheme to set the ranch on fire. Before breakfast, it was sufficient for the sheriff to ride out with 10 men and drag Harlan Voss off his opulent porch. The town felt different once it was over, quieter, lighter, even. For the first time, people tipped their caps at Lily. She had survived something that was intended to shatter her, not because she was a widow. Carrying respect rather than sympathy was odd, but it fit better than she had anticipated, and she hadn't done it by herself. Eli and Lily sat on the same hay bale where the rattlesnake had been waiting for her later that night. The delicate gold of the sky over the Bighorn Mountains was only seen after a storm had passed. Eli informed her that people were put to the test by the earth. People were also put to the test by life. He said, "You do not get to choose the hard days, only the way you stand through them." Lily gave him a smile. She told him that she was sick of being by herself. Eli remained silent. He remained silent for a considerable amount of time. Then, Slowly and carefully, he turned her hand palm up and traced the calluses she had developed over the previous few months with his thumb before putting her fingers inside his own. Perhaps that is the lesson to be learnt from all of this. Sometimes you need to be knocked down by life to see who can assist you get back up. Fear can sometimes reveal a strength you were unaware you possessed. Perhaps you are familiar with the emotion. When you look back and see that you survived what you believed would be your demise. And sometimes the moment you stop running, the person you trust the most shows up. I have a question for you before we go on to the next story. In Lily's shoes, what would you have done? And when the issue arises, who would you like to have by your side? Give this video a like and subscribe if this tale touched you in any way so you don't miss the next installment. Now, sip your tea, settle down, and let me know where you are listening.